I didn't plan on ever moving back into a house connected to my childhood. Life had its own sense of humor though. One job ended, my apartment lease expired the same week, and before I could even process any of it, I found myself dragging a half-zipped suitcase up the familiar walkway to Marsh's house. Not Uncle Marsh. Just Marsh. Everyone called him Uncle out of respect, mostly because he had been a constant presence in my life ever since I was 5. He wasn't blood. Not even a distant cousin. Just my dad's closest friend, more of a brother to him than anyone else. After Dad died, Marsh stayed close to our family in quiet, unobtrusive ways. He checked in on us, helped fix things around our house, brought groceries without being asked. But we never lived together. Until now. When I knocked, the door opened in under 3 seconds, as if he had been standing right behind it. And somehow, that felt like him. His eyes softened the moment he saw me. "Come in before you melt in this heat, Beta." I stepped inside, the air conditioning washing over my skin like a forgotten luxury. He reached for my suitcase before I could argue, and with the same ease he used to lift me onto his shoulders when I was small, he carried it down the hall. "Guest room's ready," he said, leading the way. His voice was deeper, more gravelly than I remembered. There was a calmness to it, lined with something like exhaustion, and something like warmth. "You'll be comfortable there." I followed him, noticing small details. His hair more gray at the temples. His shoulders still broad, the faint scent of aftershave and sandalwood that clung to him like a signature. He pushed open the guest room door. I stepped in and froze for a moment. He'd prepared it. Not just cleaned it, prepared it. Fresh sheets. A new lamp. My favorite kind of thin cotton blanket folded neatly at the end of the bed. Even the curtains were the kind I used to prefer, light enough to let in morning sun. "You didn't have to do all this," I murmured. He shrugged lightly. "Didn't want you sleeping in a dusty room." I wanted to say thank you, but the words felt too small for the feeling in my chest. Instead, I placed my bag on the bed and turned toward him. That's when it happened, the first moment. The moment I felt something shift in the space between us like air tightening. He was still standing by the door, one hand resting on the frame. His eyes were on me, but not in the way older family friends usually look. Nostalgic, amused, indulgent. No. His gaze was different. Steady. Searching. Quietly intense. "You've grown up," he said softly. I managed a small smile. "That tends to happen." He exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh. "Not like this." "What do you mean?" He shook his head slightly as if dismissing his own thoughts. "You look different, stronger, more yourself." His words landed somewhere deep inside me, surprising even me. I looked away first. The silence between us stretched, not uncomfortable but something else. Something delicate. Something that made me aware of my own breath. He cleared his throat. "Come eat when you're ready. I made dinner." I nodded. He lingered a second longer, as if deciding whether to say something else, then stepped out and gently pulled the door halfway closed. The evening passed quietly. We ate simple dal and rice. He asked me about the job I lost, the apartment I left, whether I was tired. I tried to keep things light and he didn't push. But every now and then I caught him looking at me in that same thoughtful way. Not staring. Just noticing. After dinner he washed dishes while I dried them. At one point our arms brushed accidentally. He didn't move away. I felt that spark, tiny, quick, confusing. But neither of us said a thing. By night the house went still. He turned off the kitchen light, then the hall light, leaving only the soft lamp near the living room sofa. I went to my room but sleep didn't come. I lay there listening to faint sounds, the hum of the fridge, the ticking of the old wall clock, footsteps moving once across the hall. I wasn't sure if it was him or just the house settling. Eventually, needing water, I stepped out quietly, hoping not to disturb him. But there he was. Sitting on the sofa, head leaned back, eyes closed. Still wearing the same shirt he'd worn all day. His forearm rested across his forehead, the rise and fall of his breathing slow, steady. I stood there for a second watching him. He looked human in a way I'd never seen before. Not the unstoppable adult from my childhood. Not the unshakable man who helped my mother through grief. Just someone tired. Someone alone. Someone real. The floor creaked softly under my foot. His eyes opened. He blinked, adjusting to the dim light. "You okay?" he asked, voice rough from rest. "Yeah," I whispered. "Just getting water." He nodded, the corners of his mouth curving slightly. "This house gets quiet at night." "It always did." He chuckled softly. "I guess it did." Then added, "It's strange having someone else in the house again." "Is it okay?" I asked before I could stop myself. His gaze found mine, slow, deliberate. "More than okay," he said. I didn't know what to say to that, so I nodded awkwardly and stepped into the kitchen. When I returned, glass in hand, he was still watching me. Not intensely. Not inappropriately. Just watching. Like he was seeing someone he hadn't seen in a long time. I stood there, unsure if I should sit beside him or say goodnight. He solved that for me by looking away, giving me the space to choose. "I'm glad you're here," he said quietly. Something in the sincerity of his voice made my heart stumble. "Good night," I whispered, retreating before he could see the confusion on my face. Back in my room, I closed the door and leaned against it, my pulse louder than the silence. I didn't know what that look meant. I didn't know why it stayed with me. But I knew one thing. Something was shifting, subtle, unexpected, unplanned. And the way he looked at me tonight. It wasn't the way an uncle looks at someone. It was the way a man notices a change. He's not supposed to notice. The second night was quieter than the first. I kept telling myself that whatever strange energy hung between us was just in my head, just the side effect of moving, stress, nostalgia, anything except what it really felt like. But the universe has a strange way of pushing things forward even when you try to pull them back. It started with something perfectly ordinary. I had just stepped out of the shower. My hair was still dripping. My t-shirt, too old and clearly shrunk in the wash, clung to my chest and shoulders as if it were trying to embarrass me. I rummaged through my bag for a looser shirt, half bent over, shaking water from my hair. That was when the door opened. Not a knock. Not a warning. Just the soft creak of hinges and a sudden shift of air. I jerked upright. Marsh froze in the doorway, holding a folded blanket in his arms. His eyes went straight to me, my hair still wet, my too tight shirt, the steam lingering in the room. He blinked slowly. "Oh, sorry? I thought you were still in the shower." For a moment, the silence was thick enough to touch. I wasn't sure what to cover first. My hair, my shirt, or my face. "It's okay," I said, forcing the words out. "You can, put it there." I gestured to the bed. My voice came out tighter than my shirt. He stepped inside, moving slowly as if approaching something fragile. He placed the blanket on the bed with careful precision, then turned to leave, but he stopped halfway, his gaze catching on me again. "You're cold?" he said quietly. I blinked. "What?" "Your hair's still dripping. And you're shivering a bit." Only then did I notice it, the faint tremble running through me. The AC vent blew cool air straight toward the bed, and my damp skin reacted instantly. "I'm fine," I said too quickly. He didn't look convinced. He stepped closer, not too close but close enough that I could feel his presence warm the air around me. The kind of closeness you feel before you realize it's happening. "Do you have a towel?" he asked. "Yeah. Somewhere." I searched my bag again, more frantic than necessary, pretending not to notice the way he was watching me. His gaze wasn't inappropriate. But it wasn't neutral either. It hovered, attentive, uncertain, something like concern layered with something he wasn't saying. Finally, I found the towel and held it up awkwardly. He gave a faint smile. Subtle. Almost shy. And God, I wasn't prepared for that. This calm, steady man looking suddenly human and hesitant. "You don't need to rush around because of me," he said softly. "I'm not," I lied again. He exhaled like he could see right through me. Which honestly he probably could. Then, in a voice barely above a murmur, he said, "I forget you're not a kid anymore." The words hit harder than they should have. I swallowed. "I'm 23 now." He nodded slowly. "I know. Sometimes memory plays tricks. You walk in with your bags and I still see that little boy running around asking me questions." He paused. "But then I see you like this and I realize everything's different. Like this. The shirt. My hair. The moment. It lingered between us." He shifted his weight, rubbing the back of his neck like he was embarrassed by his own honesty. "I shouldn't have walked in without knocking." "It's okay," I said again, softer this time. He glanced at the wet hair clinging to my forehead, and his fingers twitched slightly, like he had the urge to fix it. "You didn't?" But the micro-movement didn't go unnoticed. "You should dry your hair before you get sick," he said. "I will." "Good." He started to turn toward the door, then stopped, almost abruptly, as if some part of him refused to leave the room just yet. His voice dropped. "Did you need anything else?" The question sounded casual on the surface. But underneath, something unstated hummed. "No," I said quietly. "I'm okay." He nodded once. But he didn't leave. Not immediately. His hand rested on the doorframe, thumb brushing lightly against the wood as his eyes stayed on me for one heartbeat too long. A breath. Pause. A feeling. Then he finally stepped out, pulling the door gently closed behind him. The room fell into silence again, but the air was different. Denser, charged, holding the echo of a moment that didn't quite know what it was yet. I stood there, towel in hand, pulse thudding in places I didn't expect. I dried my hair mechanically, but my mind was replaying the doorway scene on loop. The way he had looked at me. The way he hesitated before leaving. The way he saw me, not as a boy, not as someone he needed to guard, but something else. A thought flickered through me, uninvited and terrifying. Did he feel it too? I buried my face in the towel, smothering the warmth rising in my chest. Later that night, I tiptoed to the kitchen for water. The house was dim again, only a soft glow from a hallway lamp. As I filled a glass, I suddenly felt it, that quiet awareness of being watched. I turned. He was standing in the doorway of the living room, hands in his pockets, watching me with a look I couldn't decipher. Not dark. Not intense. Just contemplative. Like he was trying to understand something he didn't expect to feel. Couldn't sleep? He asked softly. I guess not. He nodded. Me neither. Another silence. Longer this time. He stepped into the kitchen but kept a respectful distance, leaning lightly against the counter. You adjusting okay? He asked. Yeah. You sure? I looked at him, really looked at him, the tired kindness in his eyes, the way his shoulders softened when he was talking to me. Something in the closeness of the moment made my voice drop without meaning to. It's strange, I admitted. Being here again. He nodded, his gaze gentle. Strange good? Or strange bad? I hesitated before answering. Strange, different. The corner of his mouth lifted just slightly. I know what you mean. There it was again. That unspoken thread pulling taut between us. I drank my water slowly, trying to act normal, knowing he was still watching me. The way his eyes moved, careful, soft, lingering a second longer on my face than on the glass, made something flutter and sink inside me at the same time. When I set the glass down, he stepped back slightly, giving me space to walk past him. But as I brushed by, his arm grazed mine. Just a touch. Barely there. But my breath still hitched. And I knew instantly, I wasn't the only one who felt the spark. His arm tensed for a fraction of a second, then loosened. But he didn't apologize. Didn't step away. Didn't pretend it didn't happen. He simply looked at me. Quietly. Curiously. Like something inside him had woken up. I whispered, "Good night." His voice came out low, warm. "Good night." I returned to my room, heart pounding so loudly I was afraid it would echo through the hallway. This wasn't nothing. It couldn't be nothing. And the truth hit me as I sat on the edge of my bed, hands trembling slightly. We were getting too close. Too aware. Too careful and careless at the same time. Too close to call it accidental. Too close to pretend it meant nothing. Whatever was happening between us. It wasn't nothing. Not anymore. Silence used to mean nothing in Marsh's house. Growing up, I remembered it as a place of clattering dishes, the hum of old fans, the faint sound of him fixing something in the yard. Even when no one talked, the house felt alive, buzzing with its own heartbeat. But the silence now was different. Heavier. Charged. As if the walls themselves were holding their breath. 3 days. That's how long I'd been staying with him. 3 days of pretending that nothing had changed even though everything had. On the third evening, I sat at the dining table scrolling through job listings on my phone. The light above hummed softly, painting the room in warm amber tones. Marsh was across from me reading something on his laptop. Every so often I caught him glancing up, just quick, almost unconscious flicks of his eyes. I told myself I imagined it. I told myself it meant nothing. But every glance felt like it held a question he wasn't ready to ask. At one point he closed his laptop gently and leaned back in his chair. "You've been staring at that screen for an hour?" he said. "I'm job hunting," I replied. "Even hunters need breaks," he countered with a faint smile. I laughed under my breath. "Since when do you make jokes?" He shrugged. "Since someone started looking like a stressed-out goldfish." I blinked. "Hey, what?" He smiled more fully this time. "Your eyes get big when you're overwhelmed. It's noticeable." Heat crawled up my neck. "I didn't know you noticed things like that." His expression shifted, small but real. "I notice more than you think." The words sat between us like something fragile, too honest, too exposed. I looked away before my heartbeat made itself obvious. After a moment he stood. "Tea." "Sure." I watched him move around the kitchen. The man could make boiling water look graceful. Everything he did was quiet, deliberate. He had a steadiness I envied, Like he never rushed, never stumbled, never let anything slip. But that wasn't entirely true. Because sometimes, he slipped with me. Like the way his eyes lingered too long. The way his voice softened when he said my name. The way his presence seemed to lean toward me even when he kept his distance. He placed a mug in front of me and sat back down. The steam curled between us, blurring the space, making the silence feel almost intimate. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I hesitated. "Not sure." He arched a brow. "I don't believe you." I swallowed. "I'm just trying to figure things out." "About the job?" "About everything." He nodded slowly. "It's normal to feel lost at your age." "You didn't," I said. He huffed a soft laugh. "You didn't know me at 23. What were you like?" I asked, genuinely curious. He thought for a moment. "Quieter. Messier. Angrier, I think." "I can't picture that," I said honestly. "Well," he smirked, "people change." "Do they?" I asked before I could stop myself. His gaze held mine, still, calm, searching. "Yes." Something in the way he said it made my chest tighten. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt like standing on the edge of something neither of us knew how to name. He looked away first, but not before his expression flickered into something almost tender, almost too open. I sipped my tea to ground myself. After a while I said quietly, "You've been different." He stilled. "Different how?" I bit my lip. "I don't know. Just different." He didn't respond. Instead, he clasped his hands on the table and stared at the wood grain like the truth was carved there. Then he said in a low voice, "You've been different too." My breath caught. "Me?" I whispered. He nodded. "You walk differently. Look differently. You're not the same person I used to know." I didn't know why my pulse reacted the way it did, why my fingers tightened around the mug or why my chest felt suddenly too small. "Is that bad?" I asked. A softer part of me braced for his answer. "No," he said immediately. Then quieter. "It's not bad at all." There it was again, that shift in the air. A quiet confession disguised as an observation. I felt it. He felt it. Something in the silence felt alive. Later that night I found him on the back porch. The sliding door was open just a crack, letting cool night air drift inside. He was sitting on the steps, elbows on his knees, staring into the dark yard. A single porch light glowed faintly above him, casting soft shadows across his face. I stepped outside. He didn't turn, but I knew he heard me. He always did. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Not really," I said, sitting next to him. "Not too close, not too far." He sighed quietly. "Your mind's loud tonight. You can hear my thoughts now?" He gave a tired half-smile. "You wear them on your face." I wrapped my arms around myself as a breeze passed. The night was cool still. The world felt small, like it narrowed down to just the two of us sitting on wooden steps in the dark. "You ever feel like something's changing?" I murmured. "But you don't know why yet?" He was silent for a long time. Long enough that I wondered if I'd said too much. Then he said, voice low and careful, "Sometimes things change before we're ready to admit they have." My breath wavered. "What do you mean?" I asked. He inhaled slowly. "I mean, life doesn't always ask permission. It just shifts. And we either move with it or we pretend nothing's happening." I turned to look at him. "And what are you doing?" His eyes met mine in the dim light, steady, unreadable, but warm enough to undo me. "I'm trying to figure that out," he said. A soft sound escaped me, something between a sigh and a laugh. "Me too." We sat like that for a while, saying nothing. But the silence wasn't empty. It was dense. Where? Comfortable and terrifying at the same time. At one point, his hand rested on the step between us, fingers brushing faintly against mine. Accidentally or not, I couldn't tell. But he didn't move it away. And neither did I. The silence stretched. Not nothing. Not anymore. Something was in it. Quiet, cautious, undeniable. Something that felt like the beginning of a truth we were both afraid to touch. And still, we didn't pull back. Not from the silence. Not from each other. The storm came suddenly that night. Rain pounded the roof, wind rattled the windows, and the sky was a dark, moving canvas of clouds and lightning. The kind of night that makes small houses feel tiny and the world beyond the walls feel far away. I had just stepped out of my room with my phone flashlight, intending to grab a glass of water. My t-shirt was slightly damp from the evening shower, and I hugged myself instinctively as I walked down the narrow hallway. I almost collided with Marsh in the dark. He was there in his usual spot near the stairs, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. He looked up, startled, then relaxed when he recognized me. "You okay?" His voice was low and calm, but there was something in it, a hint of tension, almost worry. "Yeah," I replied, brushing past him. "Just didn't expect the blackout." He didn't move. "Not quite." His eyes followed me as I fumbled toward the kitchen. Then he stepped aside, barely, just enough for me to pass, but close enough that I felt the warmth of his presence brush against me. It was the first time I realized how much I was aware of him. How much I noticed the space he filled. In the kitchen, he lit 2 candles with slow, deliberate movements, the soft glow spilling across the counters, painting everything golden. Shadows danced on his face, softening the angles I'd grown up trusting and familiar. "You used to hate storms," he said quietly, watching the rain streak against the window. "I still do," I admitted. "Then why aren't you hiding under a blanket?" he asked, his voice teasing just enough to make me look at him. I wanted to see what you were doing," I said. Truthfully, my eyes kept drifting to him even when I tried not to stare. He tilted his head, studying me for a moment, then exhaled softly. "I'm glad you stayed out here." I wanted to smile, but instead I swallowed, feeling a lump in my throat. Lightning flashed, illuminating him completely for a second. His shirt clung slightly to his chest from the humidity, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His broad shoulders, the calm of his posture. It struck me all at once how magnetic he was. A thunderclap followed, sharp, and I flinched. "Still scared?" he asked. I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek. Without thinking, he reached out and rested his hand lightly on my arm. Just a touch. So small. But it made me freeze. The warmth of his skin transferred through the fabric of my shirt. My pulse spiked. My chest tightened. The hair on my arms lifted, and the room seemed to shrink. "I'm here," he whispered. I didn't know whether to pull away or stay. Somehow I stayed. The lightning flashed again, the rain drumming faster, and I realized that the touch, his hand on my arm, wasn't fleeting. He didn't withdraw it after a second. He didn't check to see if I wanted him to. He just held it. The simplicity of it was overwhelming. Not a confession. Not a promise. Not even a question. Just a presence, physical and emotional at once. I swallowed, trying to focus on something, anything, other than the way my heart felt as if it were trying to escape my chest. "You've changed," he said softly. "How?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "Stronger. More yourself," he said. Then he paused. But still gentle. The honesty in his voice struck me. The gentleness behind the words was almost unbearable. I wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but my tongue felt heavy. Instead, I felt his thumb move slightly on my arm. Not brushing. Not stroking. Just a micro-movement that sent warmth down my spine. My breath caught. I didn't realize how much I missed this," he murmured. I tried to respond, but words seemed inadequate. The candlelight flickered, painting him in gold and shadow, and I realized how much I'd been craving a closeness I hadn't named. A closeness that wasn't about obligation or familiarity. Something quieter. Tender. Unexplored. He glanced at me, and I swear, for a fraction of a second, the storm outside faded, leaving only the space between us, charged and fragile. Then, as if startled by his own boldness, he stepped back slightly. I shouldn't," he began, breaking the moment. "No," I interrupted softly. "It's okay." He shook his head, breathing unevenly. "I'm crossing lines I shouldn't even be near." "You're not," I whispered, though my voice trembled. "You didn't do anything wrong." His jaw flexed. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once, twice, then stopping to lean against the counter. "I need a moment," he muttered. I watched him, heart still racing, the warmth of his hand lingering on my skin even though he had moved it. The room felt different now. Smaller. Louder. And in that space I realized, that touch wasn't fleeting. It wasn't casual. It had stayed. And so had I. The shock of feeling seen, truly seen, wrapped around me in ways I hadn't expected. The intimacy wasn't verbal, wasn't even confessed. It was in the silence, in the warmth, in the small gravity of being near him. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just let the sensation linger. Even after he left the kitchen to let me breathe, I stayed near the counter, tracing the faint imprint of his hand in my memory, the heat in my arms still burning softly. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to hope. That maybe, whatever this was, it wasn't accidental. That maybe, it wasn't nothing. The touch stayed with me. And somehow, I knew he felt it too. The morning after the storm, the house was quiet in a way that felt deliberate, almost respectful. I stayed in my room longer than usual, tracing patterns on the bedspread, replaying last night's touch, last night's silence, and everything that had happened between us. My pulse was still erratic even though the memory should have faded. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, him to speak first, me to stop imagining things, but I knew that the air between us had changed irrevocably. By the time I stepped into the kitchen, Marsh was already there, sipping tea, the golden light from the window painting his face in soft warmth. He didn't look away like he usually did when I entered the room. "Morning," he said, voice low and steady. "Morning," I replied. We moved around each other silently for a few minutes, pouring milk, picking up toast, drinking tea. Every motion felt deliberate, careful, as if we were both aware of how fragile the peace between us had become. Finally, I broke the silence. "Can we talk?" I asked. My words were hesitant, cautious. He looked up, eyes searching mine. "About what?" "Last night." His jaw tensed slightly and he set down his cup. I don't want to make you uncomfortable." "You didn't," I said quickly because my chest felt tight enough to suffocate if I didn't say it. "You didn't make me uncomfortable at all." He exhaled, slowly, like he had been holding the air in his lungs for hours. "I crossed a line," he admitted, his voice quiet, almost pained. "I know that." "What line?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "The line where I stopped being a family friend. A guardian. Someone you trust without complication," he said. He avoided my eyes for a moment, then finally met mine again. "I shouldn't have." "You shouldn't have what?" I pressed softly, leaning forward, drawn to him despite every rational thought screaming caution. "Touched you." "Let it linger," he admitted. His fingers flexed against the cup in front of him, and I noticed a tremor in his voice I hadn't heard before. "I shouldn't have let myself feel this way. Not after everything." I swallowed. The words, and the emotion behind them, struck me in ways I hadn't expected. My own chest tightened, my breath catching. "Marsh," I started, then stopped. Words weren't enough. He looked at me and for the first time I saw something in his eyes that made my heart ache. Vulnerability. Not the casual, everyday vulnerability he'd always shown when offering advice or fixing something broken. Real, emotional vulnerability, the kind reserved for moments you aren't supposed to share. "I can't stop thinking about it," he said, voice low, raw. "I shouldn't want this. I shouldn't want you. Not like this." "I want it too," I whispered before I could stop myself. His eyes widened, and for a heartbeat, the kitchen felt smaller, closer, like the space between us had disappeared entirely. "You do?" he asked, almost disbelieving, almost afraid to breathe. "Yes," I said, the words steady though my hands trembled slightly. "It doesn't feel like nothing. Not anymore." He exhaled, heavily, running a hand through his hair, finally allowing some of the tension to release. I've been trying to fight it. Trying to pretend I wasn't feeling anything. But I can't." "Then don't," I said softly. He leaned back in his chair, looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time, the way I had imagined countless times in my mind but never dared to believe would happen. "It's complicated," he murmured. "You're young, Marsh," I interrupted gently, "I don't care about complicated. I care about us right now. About this moment." He swallowed, voice barely audible. "I don't want to hurt you. Or ruin what we have. Or this. Whatever this is." "You're not," I said firmly. "You could never hurt me. Not like that. Not now." He studied me, searching for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that I was saying it lightly. Finding none, he slowly leaned forward, a quiet surrender in his movements. His forehead pressed against mine, the warmth of him grounding me, steadying me in ways I hadn't realized I'd needed. He started, then closed his eyes, letting the words fail him. Instead, he rested there, breath mingling with mine, letting the connection speak instead of language. I reached up, brushing the corner of his jaw, letting my fingers linger where they met his skin. He flinched slightly, not in recoil but in the awareness of intimacy. Then he relaxed, a small sigh leaving his lips as he pressed a little closer. We stayed like that, forehead to forehead, breathing together. No words. No rush. Just the shared understanding of something that had grown too strong to ignore. Eventually, his hand found mine, fingers threading naturally, like they'd always belonged together. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. "Do you?" he whispered finally, voice trembling. "Do you think this is real?" I swallowed, heart hammering in my chest. "I think it has to be. Because it feels like it. Because I feel it too. Every time I see you, every time you look at me like that." His lips parted, a faint breath escaping. "I've forgotten what it feels like to want someone," he admitted softly. "I forgot how heavy and light it can be at the same time. I don't want to forget it again." I leaned closer instinctively, our foreheads still touching. "Then don't," I said. And just like that, the boundary between us shifted. Not fully crossed, but irreversibly altered. Not a kiss, not a confession in words, but the brush of breath, the closeness, the silent surrender, enough to make it undeniable. He pressed his forehead just a fraction harder against mine, a subtle question, and I answered by tilting my head slightly, letting our faces hover in that precarious space where nothing had to be said, yet everything had changed. The storm outside had softened, rain tapping gently against the windows now. But inside, something fierce and new had settled. I finally whispered, "It doesn't feel like nothing." He exhaled slowly, almost relieved, almost afraid, and nodded. "Then we just start here. We see where it goes. No pressure. No rush." I squeezed his hand gently. "I like that." He gave a small, almost shy smile, and the tension around his eyes softened for the first time. For a moment, we simply existed together, connected not by words but by the quiet, undeniable pulse of something real between us. Whatever this was, whatever it might become, it wasn't nothing. And for the first time I allowed myself to believe that it could be something extraordinary. After that morning in the kitchen, something changed. Not in a dramatic, overt way. There were no declarations, no grand gestures, no sudden shift in the way Marsh and I existed in the same house. But everything felt charged with quiet intention. Every glance lingered, every brush of hands felt deliberate, every silence full of unsaid confessions. I found myself noticing him in ways I hadn't before. The tilt of his head when he was thinking, the way he always stirred his tea counterclockwise, the subtle crease at the corner of his mouth when he smiled. I caught myself holding my breath when he leaned near, pretending it was because of the light, the angle, the kitchen counter between us. One evening, a few days later, we ended up in the living room together. The rain had returned, soft and steady this time, the house bathed in a muted gray light. I sat cross-legged on the rug, reading a book I wasn't actually paying attention to. Marsh was on the sofa, laptop closed for once, scrolling through something on his phone. We hadn't spoken about the last conversation, but we didn't need to. The connection was there, tangible, humming under the surface like the quiet thrum of the house itself. "You're quiet," he said suddenly, looking up. "I'm just enjoying the sound of rain," I said, though it wasn't entirely true. He tilted his head, observing me carefully. "You've been different these past few days." I laughed softly, almost embarrassed. "How different?" "In small ways," he said. "The way you sit. The way you breathe. The way you avoid my gaze when you're nervous." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," he said, voice gentle. We lapsed into silence again, but this time the silence wasn't heavy. It was comforting. Full. Safe. At one point I moved closer to the sofa, pretending to adjust a pillow. He didn't flinch. He didn't step away. And then, without thinking, our knees brushed. I froze. So did he. Our eyes met, and for the first time, there was no hiding the electricity that sparked from something so small, so accidental, so intimate. He swallowed, looking away for a moment, then returned his gaze to me. "I didn't realize. I'd been waiting for this," he said softly. "What?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "For you," he said. "I didn't know I was waiting for you to be close like this. To be you. Right here. Right now." The words hit me harder than anything I had imagined. I wanted to say something clever, something to match his honesty, but nothing came. Instead, I simply leaned forward slightly, letting the space between us shrink. He noticed. He let the space shrink further. And then, without warning, he reached out and rested his hand lightly on mine. The touch wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't even deliberate in a way that demanded recognition. But it was deliberate enough that I couldn't ignore it. My chest tightened. My breath caught. Every nerve in my body seemed to focus on that single point of contact. He started, then stopped, clearly struggling to articulate the complexity of his feelings. "You don't have to," I whispered. He exhaled, letting his forehead brush against my temple briefly. "It's strange," he murmured. "To feel this after all these years. To feel so much at once. Strange good." I asked softly. "Very strange good," he said, and I heard the quiet honesty in his words. We stayed like that for a while, forehead to temple, hands intertwined, breathing in sync. The rain tapped softly against the windows, and the room seemed to shrink to the two of us, cocooned in warmth and quiet. Later that night, we ended up side by side on the sofa, sharing a blanket without acknowledging it. At first, it felt awkward, two people adjusting to a new intimacy that neither had named. But slowly, gradually, the discomfort melted away. I rested my head against his shoulder and he didn't move. His hand found mine again, fingers threading naturally, comfortably, as if we had done this 1,000 times before. "You're warm," I whispered. "So are you," he replied, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. We didn't speak for a long time, just breathing together, letting the quiet say everything our voices couldn't. I realized then that I had been waiting for this too, without even knowing it. Waiting for a touch that wasn't just physical but emotional. Waiting for someone to see me, really see me, and let me see them in return. The night stretched on, gentle and slow, until I finally whispered, "I don't want this to end." "It won't," he said softly without hesitation. "Not if we don't want it to." I felt a flutter of hope, fragile and luminous. "Even if it's complicated?" He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. "Even then. Especially then. Because things worth having are never simple." We stayed there for hours, talking softly, sharing small jokes, teasing lightly, opening up in ways that felt sacred and tentative. Nothing needed to be labeled. Nothing needed to be rushed. At one point, our faces were so close that our breaths mingled. I felt his hand brush my cheek, not a touch of lust but of something deeper, a quiet declaration of care, trust, and longing. I realized then that this was love growing in the smallest, subtlest ways. Not explosive or dramatic. Not loud. Not defined. But undeniable. And for the first time I allowed myself to hope that maybe I hadn't just imagined it. Maybe he had felt it too. Maybe we had been waiting for each other without knowing it until this moment. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stayed there. Letting the warmth of him, the rhythm of his breathing, and the quiet intimacy wrap around me like a promise. Because sometimes, love didn't need grand gestures. It didn't need declarations or confessions. Sometimes, it only needed presence, patience, and the gentle courage to be close. And that night, in the quiet of a Rain Street house, I realized. I hadn't known I was waiting. But now that I had found him, Marsh here close present, I didn't want to be anywhere else. Not in the world. Not in the past. Not in anything. Just here. Just this. And that, I understood, was enough. The mornings in Marsh's house had a new rhythm now. Not loud. Not rushed. Not the clattering, busy mornings of my childhood. Quiet, gentle, deliberate, the kind of mornings where the sun peeks through half-closed curtains and paints everything gold, softening edges and leaving shadows that feel like whispers. I woke first that day. The bed was warm on one side, empty on the other, but I could still feel him. His presence lingering in the air, in the faint scent of his shampoo on the pillow, in the warmth the sheets had held. I smiled softly, a quiet, private smile, and padded down the hall in bare feet. Marsh was already in the kitchen making coffee. He hummed faintly, a tune I didn't recognize, but it was comforting. The kind of domestic normalcy that now felt extraordinary. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him. The sunlight caught the gray at his temples, softened the lines near his eyes, highlighted the subtle movements of his hands as he poured the coffee. There was a serenity about him that made my chest ache in a tender way. "Good morning," I said softly. He looked up, startled for a second, then smiled. The same smile he had given me that first night I moved in. Warm. Unhurried. Familiar yet completely new. "Morning," he replied, voice low, calm, steady. I walked closer, unconsciously moving toward the counter where he stood. He didn't pull back. We drank coffee in companionable silence, letting the quiet stretch between us. It wasn't heavy anymore. Not tense. Not fragile. It was something else. Something intimate, safe, and quietly thrilling. At one point, I reached for the sugar, brushing his hand lightly. Just a whisper of contact. He froze. Then a small, almost shy smile spread across his face. "You're relentless," he teased, though there was softness in his tone, not accusation. I like being near you," I said quietly. He paused, lifting his eyes to mine. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached out, fingers brushing mine, holding my hand gently, naturally, without hesitation. "I like it too," he said. It was simple. Uncomplicated. Yet it made the world shrink to just the two of us, suspended in a moment that felt like it had been waiting all our lives to happen. Later, as the morning stretched on, we found ourselves on the back porch. The air was crisp, the faint scent of rain lingering from last night. Marsh leaned against the railing, and I sat beside him, shoulders nearly touching. We didn't speak for a while. Words weren't needed. Just the quiet companionship, the warmth of being close, the gentle brush of our arms, the shared rhythm of breathing, it was enough. Do you think we can keep this? I asked after a long pause, voice tentative. Keep what? He asked, though he knew exactly what I meant. This, whatever this is, between us. He glanced at me, then back at the horizon. I don't know, he admitted honestly. I can't say where it will go. Life doesn't hand out guarantees. But we can try, I said softly. Together. He turned to me then, eyes steady, searching, vulnerable, and for a heartbeat I saw everything. The caution, the longing, the quiet surrender. We'll try, he said finally. And whatever this becomes, we'll face it together. I nodded, feeling a rush of relief and tenderness. We stayed there for a while longer, letting the morning stretch lazily around us. Eventually he took my hand in both of his, a quiet anchor in the shifting world. Come inside, he said, voice soft. I made breakfast. In the kitchen, the small, domestic ritual of cooking together felt sacred. We moved around each other with ease, passing utensils, sharing small smiles, leaning close to reach for ingredients. Each brush of our hands, each accidental shoulder bump, sent a thrill through me, a reminder that nothing between us was ordinary anymore. After breakfast, we sat at the table, plates half finished, coffee cups steaming. The sun poured in, painting the table in soft gold, and for a moment, everything felt still, suspended. You know, I said, I didn't expect any of this. Not this closeness. Not this feeling. Neither did I, he admitted, his fingers finding mine again, entwining naturally. I didn't ask for it, I whispered. And I didn't expect it. But, I hesitated, looking at him. I wouldn't undo it for anything. He smiled softly, brushing his thumb over my knuckles. Neither would I, he said. We lingered there, words unnecessary, hands entwined, hearts quietly racing yet steady in the same rhythm. Eventually I rose to pack a small bag. I had a meeting in the city, but for the first time, leaving didn't feel urgent. Marsh walked over, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. Don't rush back, he said softly, though his gaze lingered in a way that made me want to stay. I won't, I said. I'll come back. He nodded, silent, letting me go but not letting the moment fade. Before leaving, I placed my hand over his. His warmth seeped through mine, a quiet promise unspoken but understood. Outside, the sun had fully risen, golden light spilling over the yard. I paused, looking back at the house, at him standing in the doorway. I didn't know what the future held. The road ahead was uncertain. Life rarely offered guarantees. But I knew one thing. Whatever this became, whatever we became together, would be worth it. And in that moment, with the wind brushing against my face and the light catching the warmth of the house behind me, I realized something simple, perfect, undeniable. I didn't expect it. I didn't ask for it. But I wouldn't undo it for anything. Because love, slow, tender, quiet, and unexpectedly fierce, had found us. And for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I belonged. The future was unknown. But whatever it became, we would face it, together. And that was enough.